Well, thank you, Juan. Thank you, Anna, for the invitation and the TCD student group. TCD apartment for like lending this space to talk a little bit about part of the dissertation. Uh, and I didn't correct the title at the beginning when Juan asked me, because part of this project was already presented in the WEX seminar a couple of weeks ago. And we're gonna try to repeat and combine with this for the next semester in the fall for the SNRE seminar, which is gonna be my final seminar. So I am trying to combine different topics. And I want to clarify first that the things that I will talk today are not. Oh, let me just because I don't have the spoiler alert for the presentation, so I will put my time. Sometimes I keep talking. Very good. All right. So first, I want to clarify that the things that I will talk today is not only Orlando Acevedo, but a huge network of mentors, mentees, and collaborators that have been allowed. And I mentioned that to acknowledge that my experience have been shaped by the privilege as a man born in a capital city. So my gender, my race, my birthplace. Also, I support my mentors, family, and friends to pursue my dreams. And I think now more than ever, we should do personal effort to improve those opportunities to more people. So that's the reason that, oh, my bad. Hey. All right. So that's part of my knowledge of privilege, and that's the reason that I will use some in the slides in the lower part, the Spanish version. My bad for the Portuguese talking people, which is huge in the city, but I don't talk the Portuguese. But maybe from Colombia, some people are connected. All right. Some of you know me, but others don't. So I will start to introduce myself. I am Orlando. I'm a biologist from Colombia in South America. And long time ago, I decided to start to study birds as a system to understand ecology and nature. And that journey allowed me to connect and meet a lot of interesting people, a lot of fascinating people in the field, in experience, and know, be participant of the growth of community or citizens or participatory science in a tropical region as Colombia. So if you're interested in collaborate, you can scan this QR for some topics that I'm interested. But as a summary, my collaborations or projects already done are in blue in the map, or in progress are in orange. And this the second chart. But if you see, like sometimes when you have like a very diverse topics of interest, you feel like trying to put some food in the same plate at the same time. It's kind of a struggle sometimes, but let's give it a try today. So for my dissertation, I try to combine different topics in ecology and conservation, from population extinction risk to functional biogeography to dynamic of distribution and range shift, and to traditional ecology knowledge. And as I mentioned before, I present already part of these topics, and today for the TCD, I will focus in the fourth part, the traditional ecological knowledge, framed on the biocultural conservation week. This week, particularly for the TCD Mood project and the class that we are talking, this week is biocultural conservation. So it was kind of perfect time. All right, so how to understand nature from that traditional ecological knowledge? Perhaps one solution is using ethnography and phenology. And I have this point of view from the ecology and the phenology of the the cycling time of events in nature, and try to understand that from the ecology perspective. And that new facet that I am trying to understand and beg your pardon because you are more experienced than me, is that ethnography. And that has some challenge. If you want to understand nature from those different dynamics of ecological of knowledge, the perception of change can be a challenge, and the practice implication at different scales is another challenge. So I use community science data to overcome different challenges in my other questions, and perhaps my interest today is try to combine or see if community science data can help us to overcome those challenges in biocultural research. So let's explain a little bit more about what is community science before going ahead to the point. So from the community science perspective, you have a spectrum from broad participation, very flexible, but without any clear research goal or a rigorous objective or design. So let's start with the first one. How many of you can raise your hand, how many of you have heard about iNaturalist, have used iNaturalist, have submitted iNaturalist this year, this month, today? All right. Well, I can assume that you know how iNaturalist works. So you have an observer to take a photo, and that photo has some metadata. So you have a label that in natural history sciences, it's a label because you have the who, the where, the what, and the when. And then the observation go to the platform, and a community of other people discuss the identity of that identification, and then you can provide information for biodiversity. This is cool because it's very open accessible, appealing, but you don't have effort information. It's the same that you spend few seconds in the field taking a photo, or all the entire week taking a photo, taking a lot of photos, because every observation is independent. While on the other side, we have a structural data that is going to control the detection probability. One of the most and the clear this kind of platforms has clear goals, survey design, and rigorous protocols. One of the most well known is the North American breeding bird survey. How many of you have heard about? How many of you have participated in that? So as you can see, like this is a really structural process data designed way back in the 70s to try to understand the population, the dynamics of North American birds from Mexico to Canada. And it's organized in routes, depicted here as blue lines in continental US. And every one of those lines is a road with point counts structure that is going to be repeated every year, hopefully for the same people with time, with the same amount of effort. So you can see that you have more control of the observation process, a lot of quality data, but it's less inclusive. Only a few of you have heard about this, and none in the room have participated in that. And it's a community science project. All right, somewhere in the middle, we have semi-structural data. And one of the most well-known is eBird. And I introduced this because I will use this as this platform as a particularly platform to answer my question. So in eBird, you have like an observation event, like this IMI2, and you have where, with the location, when, with date, somewhere there, yeah, the time, but also information of the effort. It was a protocol traveling. I report the complete list of the species that I was able to register during 65 minutes and less than 1 kilometer distance in a transit map. So you have the open and flexible metadata of the observation, the open and flexible good part of that unstructured data, but you also have some observation metadata to control in the analysis process. In this video, you can see 1 minute of report, Friday in March after 4 p.m. in one only minute, and every gray dot is one place that have contributed to at least with one checklist waiver, and the yellow ones are those submissions during that period of time. So in only 1 minute, we have 36 lists all around the world that have contributed to over 35,000 checklists for the single day from all around. So this is kind of a super powerful data set to understand nature. And I truly believe that these kind of platforms are democratizing science because now you can be the expert and contribute, as Dr. Jose Miguel Ponciano, producing checklist to ever, but also you can be a newbie in plants or whatever, whichever group, and also contribute to science. So it's kind of that movie of Ratatouille that everyone can cook, but here is everyone can do science. All right. So I mentioned that back in the days, only somewhere. So in the previous seminar, I tortured the audience with some mathematical modeling. I won't do that today. And you're going to be happy with that. Okay. Well, Miguel and Miguel now. So today I'm going to drive in the main question and my main project that I'm going to present today. So, and the driving question here is, how do indigenous knowledge and community or citizen science data can be integrated to better understand nature? So perhaps you can hear really thin in the background. That is a song from the Amazon of Colombia, close to Leticia, referencing a history of the wood quail over there. And I was struggling to put a title to this project because it's still in course. We are collaborating with indigenous leaders that are experts in bird identification, community leading. There's one indigenous member of our group that is a biologist, and he graduated from biology and come back to the group. Ana Maria is our anthropological expert. And some young biologists in the ground trying to help conservation. So it's an interdisciplinary group of people, and we're trying to understand. But as I mentioned, I came with this one eye version of the ecology part. But there is one concept that I just realized a couple of weeks ago that is the two-eye seeing approach. So you can have one eye with the knowledge of and the way of knowing from the indigenous people, and the other eye with the knowledge and the way of knowing from the Western traditional scientific method. So we're going to try to do this approach in a location in the Alps. And what is the reason to do that? There's a bunch of evidence putting together that the biodiversity is in crisis. We have in the last report, the Life Planet report show that over 73% of the species are declining in the world. And perhaps one good strategy is try to come back to that traditional ecological knowledge that some indigenous has. For instance, in this figure, we use this figure use the cycle living of the Pacific salmon to try to leverage the story, language, the ceremony, practice, and law that the indigenous people from the Pacific, northwestern US use to understand their nature from that traditional colonial knowledge to the indigenous science and to the indigenous knowledge. So before arriving to TCD and knowing all these topics that you already know, I used to do this same exercise. Let's imagine, and before AI make figures for us, let's imagine a figure that connects birds and trees. And perhaps one artistic mind is going to think in something like that. It's trees and birds. But the ecological point of view is kind of, well, I can think in the avian frugivore plant interaction network. And some evolutionary perspectives are going to say, All the birds are related by the tree of life. There's no wrong answer here. All three kind of point of view are bringing some knowledge, and perhaps if we try to open our minds to different knowledge, we can end with a better perspective. And that was the reason to try to put a seminar for the Tropilunch, because I believe that this is the core framework for the TCD. All right, so indigenous science and ecology has a lot of common. From the interdependence of biotic or components in the habitats or the territories. So we can think in ecology in the biotic interactions, but also in the reciprocality of different components within the territories for the indigenous people. The worship for nature, from the perspective of respect, for instance, or principles as a researcher in a personal life, but also the spiritual part of the community's indigenous people. Taking care of nature for the next generation is kind of the basic of conservation, and is part of a lot of the indigenous science literature. Humans belong in nature is something that has been changing through time in ecology, but is very crucial to have that in mind. And in particular, the Amazon region has this very rich way knows of knowing nature and understand nature. This is an illustration from the Upper Rio Negro in Brazil, close to the area that I have been collaborating, and it depicts the three domains of nature but that they understand. The ceiling or the upper aerial level that is going to bring some constellations, some stars appearing and like driving the way they live. The middle part is the soil and the forest and the habitat, and the other is the water and the like subsoil and nature. And that is quite interesting because talking with the community people in the Amazon of Colombia, I was reading this same perspective of the three different domains. So the indigenous peoples traditionally has this perspective of knowing nature and understand nature and maybe monitoring in their own traditional way the rhythms of the planet, the Earth's rhythms in cycles. And sometimes they have concentrated in graphical perspective, which is the ecological calendars. So this is an example from Chile that has this strong seasonality perspective from different communities. But in ecology, we also try to find that phenological patterns of nature or those earth rhythms. In this recent description, we found a strong variation in acoustic activity across the year for that little cattit that make sounds in that borrow of the branch. So it's kind of, we start to see some similarities over there. So today, sorry, you mentioned that part of the assume part. All right, was my bad. So we're going to talk today, or the project that we are doing in collaboration is trying to understand the ecological calendar in the Gran Vaupés Indigenous Reserve. This is an indigenous reserve that begins in 1980s, 82 or 82. It's multi-diverse, and in this territory we have the presence of the SENA, which is the technical institution, an institution of technical training for a lot of rural areas in Colombia. It's maybe the unique or the only opportunity of training for local people in many places in Colombia, and it's based in oral tradition and highlighting the importance of birds. So I have to clarify that this project is, I arrived late to that project. If you see the dates, they start in 2011 with the support of the Tropembos Colombia and the SENA. They start some training aiming to bird guiding in agritourism development, but they by themselves in the middle of this multi-ethnic territory, they established by themselves as Semillero de Investigación, a research group in ethno-ornithology from the Me Too area. And they have produced these 3 booklets that tell stories of birds and have this strong component of the oral tradition of different communities in this region related with the birds. This is great. And you can see what a timing, because when they started that, the Humboldt Institute and the Environmental Ministry and Audubon Society and the Network of Birdwatching in Colombia, they start to update the National Strategy for Conservation of Birds in Colombia, the ENCA. So that ENCA is a multi-sectoral alliance to try to understand the best strategies to conserve birds in Colombia. And they include part of my collaborators in Me Too in the semillero to try to bring some priorities from the community perspective. So they include, besides the biological objectives that bring the ecologists to the room all the time, they include new 2 no biological objectives. One is the cultural system associated with bird appreciation, and the other is habitats. And in this map, they put together the systems, the cultural systems associated with bird appreciation is in purple, and the aviturist activities in focus is in the green. So you can see the importance to try to understand. Although we have a lot of overlapping in different regions, I have the opportunity to collaborate with people in the center of that node. And I know that I withdraw of the board of this ENCA because it was in the time that I was starting my PhD, so I was trying to focus. And I didn't know all the things that I have learned in the TCD at that time. But now reading again, the ENCA is kind of, they have some implicit bias towards the benefits of some activities, such as ecotourism. So that is kind of an interesting point that we transmuted and changed some topics. So the people in Me Too start to understand the relationship from birds from the perspective of the soil, which is defined as the biological fact of living. The things that you can at first thought just bring to your mind if you want to understand the ethnography of some local community, perhaps what are they eating, how they are using that resource, like birds as a part of the landscape, food resource, or a ritual culture. That is kind of the ethnographic part, and they start in this point of view. However, during the process, they also understand that a lot of the traditional ecological knowledge that the communities has the bias, the way of live the life. So some of the birds make the noise, the communication, and they start to harvest some fruits in the road. When the toucan start to sing, they know that the rainy season is starting. So and perhaps that relationship and that response from the community and from the non-human inhabitants in the forest can be framed in something that I didn't know at the time, but perhaps it's that relationship, it's shaped and be shaped by the political and social externalities and internalities. In my ecological language, this is known as environmental stochasticity and demographic stochasticity. But in the social realms, it's like, well, sociopolitical is affecting that aspect. But also the internal conflicts can affect that outcome. And it's not just the response of the community or just the response of the birds alone. They are together responding at once. So it seems that there is a multi-species ethnography part that is developed by their own practices in this territory. However, the multi-species ethnography has some critics that you can anthropomorphize the other non-human components of the forest. And to avoid that bias, a real interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary collaboration can be super handy. And actually, I try to use, like, this is kind of the similar approach when you have lower structure to have some data from the traditional knowledge, but you can have like super structured ways of having that data and somewhere in between. So my ecological eye, when I saw these maps that they share with me, they develop, and every point it's one individual of the species. So you can see the change in abundance from some groups, the change in composition. My ecological eye was thinking in in short list of ever with the community in here represented that those change. And that was like, oh, maybe we can try to connect these two different knowledge at once. All right. And it's already happening in the ground. So it's nothing new that Orlando came. You remember this map? So in a recent publication, we use EBIR data to try to map the species distribution at the local scale for the birds of Colombia. And in this map, the white points are here. So all this area is represented by the distance of absence or distance of presence. Basically, it's telling that if the map is super wide, you have better coverage of the sampling effort in EBIR and less uncertainty. And you can see that there are one of the hotspots in the middle of the Amazon of Colombia is exactly here too. So it's already happening. So this training of people receiving external influence of habitudes is already happening. So it's better to act now and try to strain this knowledge of the people. I made this figure to just track the timeline of behavior of EBIR submissions, like well, the timeline, and the different protocols used in the platform. So you can see that there is an exponential growth, which is common all around the world of the use of EBIR. So we have perhaps this opportunity to act now and I don't know, like protect the traditional ecological knowledge before external influence can affect that knowledge. All right. So this is the calendar that they developed. From the perspective of these communities, the wheel or the anaconda, it's a really important place. They are born from the anaconda. So some of the constellations that start to appear in the ceiling in the sky of the nights in this region of Amazon, they start here to name that anaconda. So that's why I'm starting the year not in a Western point of view from January, but from the middle of August. So in the middle of August, it's starting the calendar. It's a transition of the time, and it goes up to the end of November with the late light rains. In this part is part of preparing the chakra, the shifting agricultural plots, and then it transitions to verano, like summer is the dry season, that extends from December to the middle of March. In these two periods, they report more fructification of different plots, and the way is the time to harvest in the chagras and like produce or work in the shifting agricultural plots. Then at the middle of March, start the rainy season. Start with light rains, and in May, more or less, start the heavy rains. So that is the traditional way of splitting the calendar year in this group. And we're going to use the same names that they do. I'm sorry, Gloria. Gloria's hearing me, and she tried to teach me how to pronounce the I, nasal I, but I cannot do it. So it's Homorimi, Hirimi, and Nokorimi. So we're gonna do that cycle of time. All right. So how can start to integrate these two research designs or these two point of view to understand nature? So this is the map that we have before for the ecological calendar and the multi-ethnic region that we are working on. And now we're gonna overlap the Iber points. So every little point here is a sampling point from Iber. The first thing that we notice is that it's concentrated in the road and some of the rivers, and it's not going away of that ways, which is traditional because most of the people that are submitting Iber list there are tourists, and all the hotels and all the stuff, it's concentrated in Metu, which is the capital city. All right. So again, this is a timeline of the contribution, and from the data set, we can randomly select one checklist. Like we can use the number of species, which was 260 species concentrated in the calendar, and with that list of species, try to find those in the Eber dataset. So from that, for every species, I select randomly one checklist per day that has either a presence or an absence. And that is depleted here. So we can see that the bars is kind of almost equal, splitted from from detection or no detection of the 200 and something species in their list. So now we are trying to control for the sampling effort of Eber to contrast these dynamics. And then here we can put the same years, but now we have the percentage of presence for the species that we use. All right. So although we control for sampling effort, the percentage of records of the species prioritized by the indigenous communities is not up to the 25% of records. All right. But now we can see in the same concept of the circular plot of the calendar, the years with more sampling effort or the years with higher sampling effort. And we can see that the variation of first, the variation of submission is changing, is increasing through time, as we evident. Every number in the little circles are the number of species reported from Eber that align with the number of species that they report in the ecological calendar. And the external color is represented the same transition, dry, and rain season. So we can use this kind of summary techniques to try to combine almost 300 species at once in one feed. But we can also see every species because every species is going to have a different story to tell. So we have 123 species in the transition, 152 species in the dry season, and 121 species in the rainy season, which is only counting this figure. So this figure depicts all the species reported in the ecological calendar by the 3 seasons. The yellow plot is absence or no report or lower abundance reported by the community. The green is present and common, and some blue is higher abundance than expected or higher, like they perceive that is higher abundant in that season. So different stories and different groups are occurring there. So for instance, we mentioned that this toucan, when it starts to sing, is kind of the way that they understand the rainy season is starting. So they have different names for different groups. For instance, Chuchu Bako is like a wood creeper. And the different groups has like combination of letters. For instance, if you have all the group of hummingbirds is Miniwa, which is like the general way to know the hummingbirds, but when they use Mimillo and something else, is like reflecting different species by behavior or something like that. And talking about behavior, Jaomi Wangi is this Albert, and it's an ant follower, and Jaume in that language is ant. So they reflect this behavior of very secretive species in their territories, reflected in the common name. And we can select different examples. So, for instance, this is a species that was recently included in the bird list of Colombia, Amazonacawali or Quipebego, and they report that all the parrots prefer to arrive and are more abundant during the dry season, which align with the fructification of many fruits that they are eating. And we can see that is very evident from the input data as well. So we're kind of talking at the same time. However, like for instance, the behavioral part or the behavioral component of the toucans that they mentioned, we cannot track from either. So this is an opportunity to open, for instance, passive acoustic monitoring with the communities there and try to understand those dynamics. All right. So remember the checklist that we use in EVO, right? So we said that we have the where here, the when, but also we have some information of like that is called metadata of this checklist. So we have the type of list, we have the protocol that is following. So I was walking is a traveling protocol. We have the duration, the distance, and the number of observers. So we have some information of the sampling effort over there. If we're going to use eBird to connect for the priorities of the local context, perhaps we have to decompose this metadata and see how is the quality of those data. So this is kind of overwhelming at once, but let's decompose this monster together, right? So we'll start with the complete eBird data, and we can see that here in the x-axis, you have the same information that we have before. So it's the metadata. And we're going to start to split the different checklists, the different efforts at once. And then at the end, we are ending with some classification over there. So the first one is the ultrafine. Ultrafine is something that a professor here at UF, Corey Callahan, uses for analyzing eBird data for North America, for the United States. So it's using complete checklist of a stationary protocol between 20 and 30 minutes. This is stationary, so it's 0 kilometers of distance, by only one observer, and that is the ultrafine. In the eBird data, we have only 0.1% of the data if we want to follow that protocol. All right. Then, in the local context, I kind of suggest that this is the perfect. Why? Because the chieftain agricultural plots and the white sand ecosystem forest, which are really interesting ecosystems to understand and dynamics to understand, are not more than 1 kilometer wide in this region. So perhaps if we use the complete checklist, either stationary or traveling, for less than 1 hour, but more than 10 minutes, less than 1 kilometer, less than 10 observers, we're going to have like fine resolution to answer ecological questions and connect with the priorities of the community. When you are analyzing eBird, they recommend to use complete checklist, stationary traveling of less than 5 hours, less than 5 kilometers, and less than 10 observers. That is the recommended, but in the local context, to me, this is a coarse resolution. But it's contributing almost the 30% of it. So all in all, we can concentrate in these protocols, and maybe this complicated figure now is providing information how to improve the eBird data in the local context in that region. And that could be replicated in different places. All right, what else? So using those protocols, we have the number of species reported in the ecological calendar, and it's going to be represented by the asterisk of the colors. And then we can concentrate the daily, using only these protocols, the daily species richness information from IBER and generate these distribution plots. So if you can see, when you summarize this at the daily basis, it's kind of a little lower than the expected number of species that the community is showing, but it's included in the variation. So there is no statistical difference. But maybe at the daily way of summarizing the things is not completely good. So we did also at the weekly time frame. So all the species that are reported at with value, and now we have from IBER is transition to more species distribution than the represented by the ecological calendars, but still are in the variation of these. All in all, this is saying that we are having two ways of understanding nature that are contributing with a similar message. Now we can focus. Do you remember that I mentioned some of the species are changing strong to higher abundance? Well, I subset that those 6 species, that trogon, this puffbird, parrot, this albert, that is a flycatcher, and a city. And we start to discuss why they mention. It was very interesting, but also we can use the information from IBER with these species that they identify as strong change in abundance across the year to try to understand the population dynamics, for instance, which is other things that I am super passionate about. So for some species like this puffbird and the albert, we don't have enough resolution in IBER to understand. And we were discussing with my collaborators in E2, and they say, yeah, some of those, for instance, the alberts, are way inside the forest, and sometimes it's not possible that the aviatourists that arrive is reporting those change in abundance as the community have been reported in traditional knowledge. Very interesting is this parrot is represented by higher abundance in the dry season as the other parrots in this ecological calendar. And from the IBER data, we have also the peak of abundance during the dry season. However, we are also including some abundance in the next season, which is kind of cool, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. In this flycatcher, this is a species that is an austral migrant. And it's an austral migrant that arrived during the rainy season. So here, although the community also report for the transition season, the IBER data is tracking that increase in abundance in the phenology of the species, and also trying to I don't know, well, it's a strong difference over there. But the others doesn't change that much. And the reason that they put for understand these few dynamics is because these species are more prone to be recorded in disturbed habitats, like in the chagrass or close to the town or the urban Amazon settings. All right. And I wanted to mention this because it's interesting that they traditionally mentioned that the parrots are more abundant during the dry season, and we see that the climate change is affected. This is data from Giovanni NASA. It's a remote science data set from NASA that you can go, you can extract the data of precipitation and temperature. Temperature is going up to 1980, precipitation for 2000. And you can see that the transition season is increasing in rainy. And well, all the seasons are increasing in temperature, which is worldwide now. But the transition season is increasing in rainy, and kind of a little the rainy season is decreasing. So it seems that the environment is changing in this region, and perhaps that perspective, the traditional ecological knowledge, now is changing. And that's why we have to reconnect those two topics and try to understand. So Now we are aiming to capacity building of using eBird by the local communities, but also asking the people that are arriving to Me Too to follow this, so we can use that data to better understand the response of these field alert. So the key takeaways here is indigenous knowledge and community science data can be integrated. The two I seen approach helps prioritize capacity building tailored to local context. So we're trying to understand these two perspectives at once, but trying to bring the priorities of the local community and the expertise that we can have. And the ecological calendar can be an active device of theory of change. From that traditional perspective to a more dynamic, while the different socioeconomical and political and global drivers are affecting this local context conservation. So it seems that we didn't get like bad digested over there, and with that, it's part of the tradition of just say thanks to all the people that have contributed in shaping these ideas, or try to be a role model for us. This is critical. The the friends that are struggling with us in the same page and trying to having fun during the moment. The family, those that are not here, but those that are recently arriving. Um, and the principal mechanism, we are going to stay a couple of years more here, thanks to hopefully with NSF keep that offer for Sonia. We're going to stay 3 years more here during her postdoc, and all the people that have contributed to this and the other topics. And hopefully I have some time to discuss.